Today on Arts 24.
This is Berlin, this is Moscow, this is Paris.
For 20 years, British photographer Johny Pitts has been travelling Europe with a camera and a question. What does it mean to be black and European?
It's undeniably a British scene there. Fish and chips, took this in Blackpool, but it's got a black hand in there. And even though it doesn't seem particularly revolutionary, I feel like they are the kinds of images that you don't see very often.
At the Maison Européenne de la Photographie in Paris, the British artist presents a show called Black Bricolage. What's the story you're telling on the walls, do you think?
I tried to improvise on the walls, and what I wanted to get away from is this sort of sense of a singular narrative, because I went out looking for Afropean, and very quickly I was shown how complicated that is. What does somebody who is of Angolan heritage living in Lisbon have in common with someone who has Eritrean heritage in Stockholm? You know, I realized that was the beauty. It's these fragments of the diaspora. And so that's what I wanted to get across on the wall, is fragments of experience where when you look in, you can see all the differences, but when you look back, there's a sense of kind of coherence.
The title is Black Bricolage. Now, bricolage, it means building something from what's available, whatever that might be. I wanted to ask you, is that a political statement about what Black Europeans have had to do in Europe with the resources they had?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, I think of the last Conservative government that we had in the UK that was very multi-ethnic, actually, but not multicultural. It all came from private school in Oxbridge. So I don't want to say that the Black experience is dominated by that kind of struggle, but for a lot of Black people living in Europe, that has been the case, and it certainly was for me as somebody who grew up in Margaret Thatcher's Britain, in the north of England. I've been making photographs between the cracks, insisting on making work even when nobody was asking me to make the work, because the work is my life in lots of ways. So yeah, I think that certainly for me, it is this sense of the bricolage. It's taking whatever you have in front of you, and not only just embracing that, but actually trying to insist that a kind of visual language emerges from that way of doing things. If you look at the history of, especially photography, but in art in general, you look at Henri Cartier-Bresson or William Eggleston, they all come from vast wealth. So they were supported to travel the world and slowly craft their images. And I think that a different kind of frenetic energy emerges when you're having to work on the hoof, you're having to work in between jobs.
And your work favours the ordinary, the commute, the living room, the cafe. You've written on the walls, beauty in Black banality. Why?
I find that so often the Black image in Europe is reduced to one of two things. On the one hand, you have a kind of sensationalized story of like gangs in high-rise estates or immigrants and like this kind of negative depiction. And then all the way on the other end, you find that actually a lot of Black photographers have to go into fashion. And so you find this kind of overconfident posturing, Beyonce record covers, or it's this sort of superlative images. I felt that what was really missing was this everyday exploration of Blackness, a sense of normality, as my life has been, and I really wanted to put that into the kind of archive, the European archive.
As part of his body of work, Johny Pitts released the book Afropean, Notes from a Black Europe, a term he says makes him feel whole and unhyphenated. Born in Sheffield to a white English mother and a Black American father, the work began as a search for identity. And you've talked about labels being problematic. I wondered, before you had discovered this word Afropean, when people asked you that question, where are you from? Yeah. What did you answer?
I always love what Zinedine Zidane says when people ask him. He says, first, I'm a Cabal from Le Castellan, then I'm from Marseille, and then I'm a Frenchman. And I think that kind of really sums up how I would identify, very much from Firth Park in Sheffield, which is a big Yemeni community, a big Black community, Somali and white working class. And then from Sheffield. And then actually, I would often skip out Britain and then go to Europe or Africa, But I think Afropean it's not, I don't go around telling people, oh, I'm Afropean. It's just more this place of possibility, and a word that I like to use that allows me to think in a creative way about this blur of identity.
We see it on the walls here, actually. Your father, Richie, he was African-American soul musician who ended up in England. Yeah. How do you see the ongoing erasure of Black history in the United States? Yeah,
it's a total kickback of everything that the civil rights movement achieved. And I think it's no surprise when we have who we have in government in the US at the moment, that they're trying to roll all that stuff back. But, you know, I would like to think that we're on a trajectory, and we take 2 steps forwards and then a step backwards. And I still believe in the kind of promise of everything that was achieved during, especially the 1960s and 70s. And I don't think you can erase that. And I think especially Black America, the kind of cultural output of Black America, it's the foundation of modern music, the amount of kind of economic power that Black America has. I think it will make it very hard to truly erase that history. But I do think we have a problem in Europe with that erasure. And I think because we didn't have a civil rights movement in Europe, it's been very easy to sort of destroy by assimilation, especially somewhere like France that doesn't keep records of racial issues at a government level. I think there has been a kind of erasure.
You have spent a lot of time documenting Paris. Black Paris. The city has this mythology for Black artists shaped by figures like James Baldwin or Josephine Baker. This idea of exile as freedom. When you strip that away, what's left?
Yeah, James Baldwin called it the gift of exile. And I don't know if it is a gift. I think there's a quote on the wall that, I quoted Amin Malouf, an amazing writer and essayist, who talks about the situation is peculiar rather than privileged. I think that what Black Europeans can really not just offer other Black Europeans, but Europe in general, is a different gaze, a look at the kind of that colonial history that often gets erased, especially as we're entering a world that feels very unstable, where everybody's questioning their identity. I think kind of under this banner of Black Europeanness, this long history of being kind of in exile, I think that offers a place for people to come and look at how people have still managed to forge ahead and create communities and persist despite kind of the worst odds. And quite often I actually feel like I have a lot in common when I speak of the Black European experience. It has a lot in common with people who might have been born in former Yugoslavia or East Germany, or these countries that no longer exist as they did. That kind of sense of the essential precarity of a nation that they understand, that a lot of people don't, I think is very important.
Among the photographs on the walls are these, taken in the Paris suburb of Clichy-sous-Bois. They mark the anniversary of the deaths of Bouna Traoré and Zayed Benna, 2 boys who were electrocuted in a power substation after fleeing a police chase in 2005. An event that ignited weeks of unrest across France.
This was an important image for me. I took it on the 5-year anniversary of the deaths of Bouna and Ziyad, who were chased to their deaths by police in 2005. And these young men would have been around the same age as those 2 young men. And I noticed that the mayor was doing this talk. He was talking to all these journalists that had come in just for the day, all white journalists. And these young men were stood on a sort of a mound in the distance, and they were completely invisible, and he was completely ignored them. A lot of my work is about making the invisible visible. So this is a really important image to focus on the people who were being overlooked, which was essentially, I think, the problem of those riots in the first place.
I wanted to ask you about the racist attacks that we've seen recently in Saint-Denis, targeting the new mayor there in the north of Paris, Balayoka, and then these marches on the streets in support of him. You've spent 20 years photographing these communities. What's your reaction to what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult and troubling and devastating to think that this is still happening. And I think it's constantly this sort of old energies that you think have been tackled, that are always just under the surface, and at certain moments in history always seem to re-emerge. And I think that during the 1990s and early 2000s, there was this sense of hope and a kind of sense that globalization was a good thing and multiculturalism wasn't a dirty word. And I think we're seeing a really big kickback against that at the moment. It's a scary time, but again, I wouldn't say I'm an optimist exactly, but I'm hopeful that France and Europe in general and the world in general is strong enough to make another move back towards sanity.
And beyond politics, an English actor of Ghanaian descent gets cast in Harry Potter as Snape. He starts getting death threats. What's going on there?
I think it's a misguided sense of what it means to be European. I often say that, the word European is often used as a synonym for whiteness, for being white. And I think that not only doesn't chime with contemporary Europe, but it doesn't chime with the history of Europe. There's that famous saying, we are here because you were there. And that long history of imperialism from various European countries that went out into the world, that enforced their culture on other places and used the blood and toil of black people to then build Europe. People don't talk about that. So when these figures emerge, or when a black actor will play a character that is European, even in a mythological universe, people, because they don't really know their history, have a real problem with it. But it shouldn't be a problem. I don't understand why it's a problem.
So, Johny, when people come out of this exhibition and see all these different lives on the walls, what do you want them to take with them?
I just want people to come here and just feel, of course, I'm documenting black culture, but I think what is undeniable about the people in these pictures is that they're also European, and to really feel that in the images. I hope that people just feel that sense of black Europe, but also just Europe. This is what Europe is now.
Johny Pitts, thank you so much.
Thank you.